this episode of Fulbright Pulse, I talked to Professor Anett-Maud Joppien, Professor of Architecture and Head of the Chair of Design and Building Technology at the Technical University of Darmstadt in Germany. Anett's portfolio of architectural works includes many buildings in the skyline and cityscape of Frankfurt, in all of Germany and beyond, such as the Marienturm and the Taunusturm in Frankfurt's banking quarter, the 140 West in Frankfurt Westend, the Max-Schmeling-Halle in Berlin, the Kaffeelager in the Hafencity of Hamburg, the Neue Lustgarten in Potsdam, or the Exhibition and Convention Center in Helsinki. Anett received her engineering pre-diploma from TU Berlin in 1980 and her diploma from TU Darmstadt in 1985. On a Fulbright scholarship, she first joined the University of Illinois at Chicago and then transitioned to the University of California Berkeley, where she graduated with a Master of Architecture in 1987 before returning to Germany, working as a freelance architect and becoming a professor. Anett's works have received over 50 national and international awards, and in this episode we talk about sustainable architecture in the 21st century.
Renewable energy sources. That means also the question of sufficiency in terms of how much living space do we really need and how much energy do we really need to feel comfortable.
The architecture in Anett's very first projects.
And so we created like a movable system of mobile grading elements, partly hydraulically movable, around a glass cube.
The architecture of the Max-Schmeling-Halle.
And we just dared to do that. And we won the competition. We buried the building in existing wall rubbles to hide, this enormous volume in the ground and create like the metaphor of a green accessible bridge between east and west on the former strip of the wall.
Of skyscrapers.
We are always very concerned with a direct integration into the urban context, but you also have to create a shape. So it's a very artistic phase, and then it becomes more and more technical as you made the point. It becomes much more engineering than just a creative act.
About Anett's approach to architecture more generally.
I really care about a holistic perspective.
And her inspirations.
Still, the Salk Institute for Biological Studies near San Diego in California, built by Louis Kahn in '62, I think. And this ever since I have studied in Berkeley.
We also talk about her time as a Fulbright scholar in the US at UC Berkeley.
Well, it's a completely different relationship between teachers and students that accompanies my communication with students to this day.
And how she got there. And during this emotional UEFA Euro Championship, we also talk about Anett's involvement in architecting the DFB campus. I'm certain you'll enjoy this episode with Professor Anett-Maud Joppien, interviewed by Mohammed Kadi. Thanks so much for carving out a bit of time into your busy schedule, because I know that currently there's a lot of lectures going on in Darmstadt, right? So thanks for taking the time today. You are an architect, and that is, of course, a wonderful kind of job that we haven't discussed so far in this podcast, because we had like scientific people all the time. And of course, you're also a professor at the TU Darmstadt. So we now have basically in one person someone who's both an artist, I think, and a scientist. And I think that is a super interesting combination that we didn't have so far. So much more. It's a pleasure to welcome you here today. Yes, and my first question also would be, how did you develop your interest in architecture, and what do you like about it?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Mo, for having me today. It's actually also my pleasure to talk to you today for Fulbright. The first question, my dream was to make a difference for society, for people. That's why my favorites when I was like 18 years old were architecture and medicine. And I obviously have decided in favor of architecture because the fascination of architecture lies in the creative freedom and also on the other side, the physical design of space in the city, and in buildings. And it was motivating to actually create something lasting, to simply build something. So I found a job that I could not only make a living from, but that I could live for and luckily live in. So I don't just have a profession, but it feels like more like a vocation, and so, which I dedicate myself.
Are you actually at home right now?
Actually, today I'm in the home office, because here I have more. It's more silent.
And did you design your own home? Actually, I don't have this as part of my questions, and I forgot actually to put it in there.
Yes, we are living in Frankfurt, and we activated a roof like almost 30 years ago, and a 2-story roof construction. Should I show you?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Yes, please.
Just give you. It's a huge space, and it has also like a terrace, and this terrace overlooks actually this skyline of Frankfurt. And by the end of the interview, we can make a walk upstairs and have a look in the skyline if you wish, and it's not raining. Yeah.
Yes, I'm actually regretting a bit that I didn't invite myself over to you and bring all the kind of podcast equipment, because that sounds like a fantastic place to host a podcast overlooking the city. That looks fantastic. Okay, so thanks so much for your answer on how you got to becoming an architect. How do you? I never ask easy questions in this podcast, so I thought, why not ask the question, how do you do construction today in the 21st century? How does construction work in the 21st century?
I think we are facing major challenges in terms of climate change. So I think that we desperately need to act differently now. And I just want to give you some quick figures. According to the UN report, the construction and building industry is at record levels of greenhouse gas emissions. And the sector now accounts for like 38% of global CO2 emissions. And we need to act. And also in Germany, like 70% of all raw materials are mined in Germany, and that has an enormous impact on the environment. And the construction industry, including road construction, in Germany grew by an average of like 52 acres every day between like 2016 to 19. And that is roughly equivalent in terms of a European championship in football. That's an equivalent of an area of 75 football pitches every day. That is why I am committed to sustainability in architecture, and that means a radical change. And actually my vision would be a revolution in the design, planning, construction, and operation process towards a life cycle oriented architecture. So we have to change a lot.
Right. What does that actually mean? So how would a sustainable building look like?
I tried that in my research projects. I've built several plus energy prototypes, and I have established like design parameters for these projects. And these design parameters apply to the major goals of sustainability, meaning plus energy by renewable energy sources. That means also the question of sufficiency in terms of how much living space do we really need, and how much energy do we really need to feel comfortable. Another really important issue is lightweight construction and modularity of construction, and also low budget considerations to make it payable, as well as resource concerns, and to make new constructions able to be adapted as redensification structures within the cities. So.
That sounds like there's a lot of objectives to follow. And that sounds like you don't get all of this. Like, it sounds pretty difficult to achieve on all of that, all of those objectives. We'll talk about some of your projects in a few minutes. Before we get there, let's actually stick to this question of how you build today. And what I want to understand is you have done your Fulbright, I think, in 1985 to 87 in the US, and you also studied architecture in the US, actually in the University of Illinois and UC Berkeley. We're going to talk about both of those studies later on too, but having studied there, you're of course the best person to ask in order to compare between how Germany builds and how the US Americans build. So what I'd like to understand is, what can the US maybe, because in the last years you have of course been a lot in Germany, what can the US learn from us in terms of construction? Where is Germany in comparison to the US, and who can learn what from whom?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't consider the 80s, because that's a long time ago. So, so we have a completely different setting. Like, climate change is one of the greatest challenges of the present day. So let me start with the United States. There are very many exciting developments and trends that have to do with structural change and transformation. Comparable to Germany. One example is the city of Detroit. Detroit was linked to the car industry, like no other city in the United States or in the world, except Wolfsburg. And just 15 years ago, the city was in a state of a terrible decay. Entire neighborhoods were fallen apart. The city was bankrupt, and some districts were even almost impossible to enter due to crime. And they made an enormous effort for structural change after difficult decades. And that can be clearly seen today. I mean, look at Michigan Central Station and the surrounding, which they have rebuilt and transformed. And so I'm very impressed by some of these developments. But in fact, the challenge here, as in Germany, is the transfer of adapted patterns of thought and behavior to the general population. Changes in behavior are obviously not on the minds of many people, like engine off, lights off, air condition off. So I think that mindset and mentality are a thick plank. And in order to compare the countries, I think that we are a little bit further on the overall context. There are very many individual initiatives in the United States, but in Germany, I think we are in a more holistic context. And so I'm involved in the German Sustainable Building Council.
In Freiburg, right? Or is this in Stuttgart?
Since 11 years, I'm a vice president. And we have actually developed, and we are the largest corporation in Europe for sustainability. And we developed and offer holistic certification systems, for example, for buildings, as well as neighborhoods, interiors, also for the building stock, which is a huge potential, as well as open spaces. And this helps planners to integrate clearly measurable categories for sustainability into the construction and planning process. And we also offer like free training, and we have an academy. And I think it's very important to spread the knowledge and expertise on sustainability. And I think we are very kind of advanced in this respect. And I think in the last few years, we have seen that our strategies and those of our fellow campaigners are taking really effect in practice, and that the paradigm shift has begun, hopefully. So,
right. So Germany is pretty far ahead, is what I understand. Is there a country that is leading with this respect in the world? So I've stayed a few years in Zurich, and I have to say, like everything in terms. Come again?
Where did you stay? I didn't get it.
For 2 to 3 years, I lived in Zurich, so in Switzerland.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
And I have to say, like, the urban planning is just incredible in that city. So everything just works out and makes sense. And wherever you go, you feel like, I don't know, how did they plan? Like, this city has had such a long history, and still it feels like everything is in the exact place where it needs to be. So, and then of course also the buildings are super modern, no matter which building you enter. From the outside, it looks super old, and from the inside, it's incredibly modern. So, no idea how they're doing it. Anyways, what I wanted to ask is which country maybe is leading? So is Germany among the leading countries in the world in terms of sustainable construction?
I think that we are one of the leading nations, but you already mentioned Switzerland, Austria, and also some Scandinavian countries, especially the shift in terms of construction, the shift away from concrete primary structures to timber construction. That's a big step. And especially Switzerland, they have established really enormous, interesting categories like the 2000 watt society and the Minagi standard. So they are always a role model for us, and we collaborate also with Swiss colleagues and also from Austria, from Vienna. So, but I think the major question is that action at international level is required to effectively protect the environment. So just think of India alone, with a population of 1.3 billion people. This is where we really need to make a massive and consistent effort with know-how, dialogue, exchange, and support. So we need to build up networks and synergy of knowledge and expertise. That would be my hope, actually. But there are also some good news from today. I just read it in the Frankfurt Allgemeine, that the renewable energy supplies almost 60% of electricity demand. And therefore, we have a new record just set in the first half of 2024, which is, I think, very encouraging.
Right. You speaking of India, there's one question, and I'm not sure how useful this question is, but maybe let me just slip it in. So when it's about nutrition and about feeding people all over the world, we say that there is enough food for everyone. It's just not distributed equally, so that some people actually still live in hunger, while others have enough, or actually more than enough. In terms of building, is it possible that everybody lives in a warm house, in a safe in a safe space, like in a physical safe space, so in a safe house, in a warm house, the way that we in Europe or maybe also in the US do? So is it, does this scale the way of living that we have in Europe across all humans on Earth?
I think there are two really important issues in your question. The first issue is the nutrition question. How much food do we need for the growing population on planet? And actually, there are lots of research made on that. And we really need to save land today. We won't be able to feed the people, not even in Europe, if we don't stop with the land use. I mentioned it before. I mean, the 75 football pitches. So we have to really take care of not building too much on this planet anymore. That's the first. It's a fact we have to really be careful about. And the second one is that I think we can achieve a comfortable and life in dignity for living of also people in India as soon as we are willing to integrate autonomous passive measures within the buildings without any technique, to really build intelligently, to really build according to the climate. There's a huge potential in that, and we are teaching this in our master curriculum. And the other aspect is that we don't need as much space as we think we need. So how we use space, I mentioned it before, sufficiency of space. We need to have really intelligent spatial arrangements within an apartment with W's, with overlap, with intelligent furnitures. There are lots of potentials. And that's what I focus on in my research, and we build these prototypes to test it.
That's a perfect bridge to my next topic. We've spoken enough about the global from a global perspective. Let's actually get to your own projects. So your projects are distributed. So you are a professor at the TU Darmstadt. You are also an architect. You do have, together with some colleagues, your own architecture company. Where you provide architecture services and construction services. So your projects, also over the last 30 years or more of your career, have been distributed all over Germany. Actually, even I just saw also in Helsinki, you have built the exhibition hall in Helsinki. You have architected it. You have projects that are distributed from Berlin to Frankfurt to Hamburg. Just saw that one of those beautiful cities in beautiful buildings in the Hafencity. You also took part in those. So it's incredible looking at your portfolio. And I was wondering, tell me about some of those projects that you've done, and do you even have a favorite project? So,
yeah, I think it's very interesting to focus on the first project, because it was very important for us, for Albert, who's my partner and husband, and he's also was a Fulbright scholar.
Oh, really?
So, yes, at Eugene, Oregon.
Did you meet through Fulbright, or did you know each other before, or did you only meet after?
We knew each other before. We were not married when we founded our office, but later on. So we were
project was
fellows.
good.
Exactly. And when we came back from the United States in '87, we started in an office right away. And our first project was a 4 square meter kiosk, which we partly have built ourselves. And the idea of this kiosk was to protect the owner of the newspaper kiosk, Ali Rosan Hussein. He was exposed to attacks, and this kiosk should protect him. And so we created like a movable system of mobile grading elements, partly hydraulically movable, around a glass cube. And to our own surprise, we received awards at the Steel Construction Prize and were published worldwide. We didn't do that ourselves, but it was done by colleagues, and that really encouraged us to continue working in a very experimental way. So that was like the focal point of it, followed by the Max-Schmeling-Halle, of course.
Can you tell me more about the Max-Schmeling-Halle? Because of course this is a very famous building, and So how did you even get to that project, and how did the construction evolve?
Yeah, actually, due to the fact that we got so many publications on this kiosk, that really encouraged us to continue working, that to participate in an international sports facility competition in Berlin. And we just dared to do that. And we won the competition, and it was about a multifunctional sports hall, which was later dedicated to the box champion Max-Schmeling. And in the competition, we put all our eggs in one basket and positioned the hall at a different location in the existing Jahnsport Park in Berlin, next to the former Berlin Wall. We buried the building in existing wall rubbles to hide, this enormous volume in the ground, and create the metaphor of a green accessible bridge between east and west on the former strip of the wall. And somehow it convinced the jury, and also we were really able to build it and to implement sustainable issues within this project.
How did you develop this idea? So I think like every building that you take a look at, and sometimes you Google it, right? And you look on Wikipedia, you look for the architect, and like in 90% of times, Frank Gehry designed it or something like this. I don't know, at least this is my rate. So whenever I like a building, it turns out like it's the same three people that build it. But I'm always wondering, so how do you have this initial idea from where, like, is it really like you're standing under the shower and you think this could be it? So how did you develop this really seminal idea?
Really complex question. The way we work, it always starts with the site. We always go on site. We explore the site. We also make research on the history of the site, and as I mentioned before, the Max-Schmeling-Halle is a very good example. This location was loaded with history. It was loaded with pain, and it was also a potential for a huge hope. So, and on the other hand, it was the most dense neighborhood in Europe. So we thought, wow, what a volume. We cannot just put it right into this green space. So we have found these little slopes with wall rubble, and we said, that's where it should go. It should go under the earth, and it should be protected by the earth, and we save energy, and the mass vanishes. And that's how things really develop. And we make sketches, and sometimes under the shower, things become even clearer. That happens as well. So it's a mixture of very emotional atmosphere, impression, and also like a dialogue between us as a group of architects who work together. And of course, we look how other architects have solved such challenges as well. We study very intensely also building history. So we learned a lot from them, from our fellow colleagues. So more or less, that's how ideas are born.
Do you have a role model? Do you have a certain architect that you draw a lot of inspiration from?
It's a really interesting question, because I thought about that, and it's really astonishing that it's still the Salk Institute for Biological Studies near San Diego in California, built by Louis Kahn in '62, I think. And this ever since I have studied in Berkeley. And it's an almost magical place with a unique campus structure right on the Pacific Ocean. And since I was there once, the images and emotions have never left me. and that's amazing.
Is it the Institute of Oceanography? Is that the or which building is it, or which campus? I didn't get it. I think
the name is Salk Institute for Biological Studies, and I can describe
biologicals. Okay, yes.
Because I can describe it. Hopefully, you have seen it, and the project actually consists of 2 wings grouped around a central courtyard. With laboratories and offices, proceeding by small rooms for reflection and contemplation, all designed to offer a view to the Pacific. And in the middle, you have like a courtyard with a strip of water. And so you have like a framed view to the Pacific, sorry. And it's an amazing structure which almost unifies sky, sea, and science. And so it kept in my mind forever and inspired me to another project and the love for gardening, because they have beautiful small orange orchards and eucalyptus groves. And so that was also an inspiration for the Neue Lustgarten in Potsdam and other projects which we followed.
Amazing. Did you also get some inspiration from American buildings in terms of skyscrapers? Because I've seen that you built a couple of skyscrapers in Frankfurt, Taunus Tower, I think, right? And then a few others also in Frankfurt. So I was in the US in 2022 and 23, and I had the fantastic opportunity to work from a few skyscrapers in San Francisco and then even in New York from 30 Hudson Yards, which was maybe so I think it was floor 70 or something.
What's your favorite one, Mo? What's your favorite?
My favorite skyscraper, my favorite architect.
Yes.
Skyscraper.
Because you were there recently.
Yes, now it's 30 Hudson Yards. So that was, I think I was in floor 69 or 70 or something like this. So the company that I worked with had like 5 floors in that building, and I had in 2019 or so I was to New York, and I remember, or 18 or something like this, and we were walking on the High Line, which is this nice area in New York. Right, in the meatpacker district, and it's I mean, like, you see that it's pretty rich, and probably I wouldn't be able to afford an apartment there, but like walking down there is really nice. And you, on the one hand, you have these super fancy apartments, on the other hand you're looking down into this very classical meatpacker district in New York. So it's a wonderful area. And I remember that I took this picture from 30 Hudson Yards, not even knowing it's called that way, and I had it as my phone's wallpaper for a couple of years, and then actually turns out I would be working there a couple of days or actually weeks in 2023. So that is, sometimes life takes interesting paths. And so I really enjoyed being in skyscrapers. So I was really keen on asking you whether you also, so what your opinion on skyscrapers is, and having built a few yourself, which is a nice way of saying it. What is your perspective on skyscrapers?
Yeah, actually, I share your passion for skyscrapers, and of course we are very fascinated by the iconic skyscrapers in the United States. I mean, my favorite skyscraper is the Chrysler Building, because it's such a beautiful sculpture.
Right, of course. Yeah.
It's overwhelming. So, but there are lots of other ones, and of course we were very lucky that we had the opportunity to kind of build upwards as well. Living in Frankfurt, working in Frankfurt, that's of course obvious, but not everybody can do it. So we did like seven high-rise buildings. I can just tell you or explain a little bit the approach we have towards very exciting architectural task. With these projects, however, we are always very concerned with a direct integration into the urban context and designing the best possible floor plans and spatial atmosphere for living and working. So in the first place, we are not interested in being very extroverted, like conspicuous, so to speak, just because it's vertical. But I think it's very important and crucial to consider the public space and urban quality of the ground floor. You could also say that people's eye level is very important to us. Nevertheless, we are aware that a high-rise building is always a structural sculpture with a long-distance effect in the city skyline. So it's very important to us to model the high-rise as an overall sculpture in the interplay between location and use. And that's really exciting to do that. So we do this in a sometimes humble manner, like the Taunus Tower and the Marienturm, humble and timeless manner. And we have the last one we have completed was the 140 West high-rise, which is a hybrid use of residential and hotel, which we did with our colleagues Cyrus Moser Architects. And here there were extreme structural and fire protection challenges in order to generate balconies and winter gardens for the individual apartments. That is not easy to do, which give the building a second layer and subtly modify the simple body. So it's always an act of sculpture, I would say.
Right, that is a fantastic way of thinking about it, and a way I haven't so far. I mean, architecture is an interesting term because a lot of artistic meaning is also conveyed to it to me. At the same time, I think it's like heavy engineering, right? You have to make sure that the whole thing stands and doesn't tumble over. So what I'm wondering is, like, what is your focus actually in terms of architecture and construction? So which part do you care most about? Is it like this rough sketch? So for example, you were just saying the Chrysler Building. I think I've seen these sketches where there's like the Chrysler Building and then there's the Empire State Building, and then they measure kind of which is how high. And this is a very like high-level perspective. That is a nice pun. A high-level perspective on architecture is really just like the outside form or shape of it. But then there's also like this question of, okay, so where do you actually put like concrete structures which hold all of the weight and that stuff? So it's a very engineering-oriented. It's the other extreme of that process. So which perspective do you care most about?
I really care about a holistic perspective. So I think designing a project and developing a project is a long phase development. It takes like 2-3 years, sometimes 4 years. So in each phase, I have a deep focus of what have to be done. In the first place, you have to consider really urban consideration. You have to consider the urban context and shape, and also the needs of the client as well. But you also have to create a shape. So it's a very artistic phase. And then it becomes more and more technical as you made the point. It becomes much more engineering than just a creative act of architecture. But that makes architecture. The holistic stepping into engineering. And so we always design from the first sketch to the end. We did the working drawings, we surveyed the building activities as well, not with with very large projects, but up to 50 million euros we were able to survey ourselves with our team. Mm-hmm. But so I just make the right focus in the right phase. It shouldn't be shouldn't sound unhumble, but we try our best not to be specialized on one phase.
I really like this perspective. So, as you know, I'm a PhD student in computer science, and we also have this term of architecture. And then there is this famous quote, which I sometimes like to also kind of transfer to architecture. So Steve Jobs once said, design is not how it looks like, it's how it works. So, which is much more this kind of spirit that you have to really think about what are you actually doing on a technical level, and that also influences, of course, how it looks. But it's not just about looks; it's really about the whole kind of function and how that relates to its looks. So, really interesting.
I really like that you say that, because architecture, as such, is an organism, like almost like a human body, and it consists of so many systems which have to be interconnected. So we need to work in interdisciplinary teams, and so I like this approach very much.
Amazing. I mean, in computer science, sometimes, or not in computer science, I think in IT departments and companies, there is sometimes this wrong understanding, I would say, that you have an architect and then you have a couple of people who do the technical stuff. And I think the better approach is actually thinking that the architect needs to know all of that stuff and probably has done it at some point in their career, and now kind of has to think from all perspectives and not just the architecture perspective. And this is basically, I understand, pretty much the same as you're thinking about this original meaning of architecture, which is, of course, in the building domain. So that is really interesting and really interesting to hear. Okay, so enough about skyscrapers and high-rise buildings. So let's talk about more recent projects, and I know that you have done the ETH-Fabrik at TU Darmstadt, which also is a fantastic bridge. And let's start with this example to you as being a professor and being an architect. So maybe let's start with this more recent project. Can you tell me a bit about this ETH-Fabrik?
Yeah, the ETH-Fabrik.
Sorry.
It was built on the Lichtwiese campus of the Technical University of Darmstadt, and we planned and realized an interdisciplinary research and implementation project. But what was the background of the project? Until now, the level of production machinery, construction, and building envelope have been separate in industrial construction. The buildings were like kind of vessels in which the machines stood and were therefore isolated from each other. And this also had to do with the fact that there were hardly any links between, on the one hand, mechanical engineering, and on the other hand, architecture with civil engineering. So it's a quite interesting relationship which never happened before, mechanical engineering and architecture. So our intention was to move construction away from the isolated consideration of industrial building architecture, technical infrastructure, and production machines. And to use this integral approach to increase the energy efficiency of the entire industrial manufacturing process. So ultimately, we utilize more or less the process heat from the machines to control the temperature of the multi-layered building envelope and so on. And so previously, separate structures such as machines and architectural space form now a kind of a symbiosis. And this was an innovative idea, and also works in ongoing scientific operations and has led to considerable energy savings. So it was an interdisciplinary planning process. I learned a lot that the more the boundaries of isolated specialist planning becomes blurred, And the more joint planning instruments are required, that makes it really, really intense and very successful.
Right. So, what? So of course, this is a very practical project. I mean, like you actually have a building in the end, and in the beginning you didn't have it. So you went from this greenfield to this new building. Being a professor, I assume that this was also involving some of students, or was this a project that you purely did with the company?
Actually, this project we have done as professors and the office, because it was under such a time pressure. But I did lots of projects. I've built prototypes for the solar decathlon competitions, like 4, 5, 6 projects with my students, with teams of 50 students, which took a little more time. But I think it's very important to apply research in architecture. Applied research in architecture is really important for me.
Right. So, what does your role as a professor gain from you being a professional architect and you being a professional architect? How is that influenced by being a professor? So, what is this relationship between the two?
Yeah, I think in our profession it's very important to combine practice with teaching and research. For example, when teaching design and construction, it is really important to have practical planning and building experience. So designing and building is, from my point of view, a continuous further education and very important for recognizing what is relevant in teaching. It helped me also a lot to develop further and therefore also to adapt the teaching content to the new developments. Vice versa, it is enriching for practice to gain new insights through research as a professor, which can be tested and applied in practice. In this respect, to resume, there is a natural synergy, I think, between two worlds that for me cannot be separated in architecture.
Right. That's interesting. I'm wondering, so for example, when you meet people in mathematics at the university, you sometimes know, okay, that is a natural talent. That is someone, okay, obviously, I mean, like they look at symbols and Greek letters in a different way than us normal people do. So I'm wondering, what is a talent in architecture, a student talent in architecture? How do you recognize a talent in university? What is their characteristic? Are they passionate about engineering, or what makes a talent in architecture?
The nice thing about architecture is that you can really enter different fields and work in different fields in architecture. So you can specialize. I'm not specialized because I'm a freelance architect, so I had to go through all the phases. But there are lots of possibilities for talented people to kind of specialize in fields. And I always try to find talents and to communicate. If I perceive a talent in a certain field, I try to communicate and share it with the students. Of course, there are some students that are very talented in design, in the creative process. But I also know, or I have experienced, that some students, they started as bachelor students, they became very talented when they continued their studies and they ended up being a really good master student in design. So it's always also a matter of progress, of motivation, of interest, and to research all the time to become better. I think to a certain degree you can learn to become a good architect. I mean, you're very lucky if you're creatively very talented, but you can be a damn good architect if you go for that. So
I understand. Interesting, and I think applicable to a lot of domains, not only architecture, but especially interesting to hear it for architecture. So now we just spoke about your students. Let's actually swap perspectives and go back to a time where you were yourself a student. Actually, when we already spoke about this, you were you used a Fulbright together, I understand, with your husband, though independently, to go to the US in 1985. You ended up first in University of Illinois. Is it called that way? I actually didn't check, I think. University of Illinois. Come again?
Actually, I left Illinois.
You left Illinois, yes. So I wanted to ask. So you first were in Illinois, right, with Fulbright, and then you actually switched over to UC Berkeley. And do you mind talking about what motivated you to go from one to the other?
Yeah, there was a backstory to Berkeley. I think I tell it because it had a big impact on me, and above all, it reflects the spirit of Fulbright. So I started, as you said, as a student at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Within a short time, I came into conflict with my professor because he was very doctrinaire architecturally. He pursued the goals of postmodernism architecture and only that. So my first assignment was to draw Ionic, Corinthian and Doric column orders, and we had to design a project in a postmodern style. And I was honestly shocked. And so I approached him and said that I have already studied all the classical orders in detail and that I could not design in a predetermined style. So, to this he replied, I quote him, that I have to swallow the bitter pill of postmodernism. I then tried to complete the task, but I wasn't able to. I told him I had a paralyzed hand. So he gave me the choice to either complete the task or leaving the program. So I left the program, not to let myself be bent, and I more or less followed my conscience, which was really hard. I found initially some shelter temporarily at the Department of Theatre and Communication. I informed Fulbright about the incident. They fully understood my decision and gave me the freedom to find a new university to continue my studies. And you cannot imagine how liberating and how relieving this was for me, because I was only 26 years old. And so then I wrote a letter to Berkeley and openly described the problem, and I actually got admission and changed in the middle of the semester. And it was a dream in every respect. And I'm really thankful to Fulbright to make that possible, because after that I really experienced freedom at Berkeley. And I learned from that that it is important to follow your conscience alone, even if this means to overcome obstacles. That's the story behind it.
You couldn't be sure of how everything after this would go on, right? So you are in this situation, you have a dependency from their program, your visa depends on it actually. So if that stuff ends and you don't have replacement, then actually you have to so that sounds like a very, very, very stressful.
When the contract was running, I lost a lot of money. It was kind of,
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great that actually everything worked out, and I understand that Berkeley was a significant improvement, and it was actually
I think not only because Chicago was so complicated, I think Berkeley was a dream in every respect, because here I encountered tolerance, openness, and a great variety of opportunities. I was able to experiment, and also we had like 3 Japanese guest lecturers, well-known architects from Tokyo, who inspired me a lot. So it was a change of world. It was a game changer to be there.
You also taught yourself in Berkeley, is that correct?
Yeah. I was asked after I completed my master degree, they have asked me to become an advisor. And I was really scared about it, or scared. I felt really immature for the job, but I wanted to give it a try anyway. So I remember that I always prepared myself intensively so as not to make a fool of myself. One important experience was that I gave a typical European feedback to the students. And the kind of feedback I had experienced at the students, including critical comments. And this was met with astonishment and embarrassment and incomprehension from the students.
That you were asking for basically for criticism in order to improve yourself, and not just for positive feedback. Or what was met with surprise?
Actually, the European criticism is really tough.
Okay.
Really,
okay, so you gave criticism, and
I gave criticism. I mean, it was a friendly but a critical criticism. But it was shocking for the students in Berkeley. They were not used to that. So we had a little conflict. And actually, we talked about it because, I mean, it was really like being in a trap. And I tried to explain them that it's not meant personally, but it's primarily aiming at improving the quality of their projects.
Okay.
It turned out to be. I was very kind of careful after that, and they were careful with me, and we watched each other. And but it was very good for both sides. But what I learned was appreciative criticism, and the students learned how to deal with criticism as such. And the great thing was that we achieved very, very good projects together. And so this form of appreciative and motivating criticism had a learning effect that accompanies my communication with students to this day. And so that helped me a lot. Another thing what?
Are you not feared at university anymore today, or are you? I'm not sure. So feared for your harsh feedback, not anymore, I guess.
No, but I'm still kind of trying to do my best. So sometimes I also have my doubts. I'm always accompanied by some doubts all the time. But that's the only way to improve. Actually,
exactly. I think it's
about their own quality. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think it's once you lose doubts about yourself, I guess that is a red flag to use to use a modern word.
But one thing I want to tell you, which was really, really great thing in the United States as a student, was a completely different relationship between teachers and students. The interaction and the communication was based on partnership and not, as in Germany at that time, hierarchical. So I also have adopted this communication at eye level. And in longer projects with student teams, we all call each other by the first name. And this was the encounter at eye level that inspired me as a future professor. So I got a lot out of this experience.
Right. Yes, it sounds like it. I think I can totally understand the point that you're making, because I feel in the US it's normal that you talk to some professors will it's still first name basis, right? So with a lot of professors, you actually have a first name basis, and especially I think at universities such as UC Berkeley, which is of course a fantastic research university too, really. There's even just like master level students in German terms that will already do research on eye level with PhD students. Sometimes you still work together on the same project and you kind of trying to achieve a common goal together rather than having one person who assesses you and the other person being assessed. It's really this, okay, let's all work together to do some great research. So I can totally understand that point, and it's really interesting to hear that you try to adopt this even in Germany, which I guess is sometimes difficult in our system, right? Because our system is in general much different, right? We have this large lecture groups. Interesting. There is another question which I forgot to ask actually before, which is we're currently, of course, experiencing the European Championship, or is it called European Championship, like the Euro Cup by UEFA? And I saw that you also did a project on the DFB campus. Is that correct? And,
yes.
And what was your role in this? So, of course, I didn't want to forget this soccer football question.
Yeah, I mean, we have built this project together with our colleagues and friends, Kader Wittfeld architects from Aachen. They have won the competition, and it was a huge project. And so they have asked us to collaborate with them. And we also integrated building information modeling within this project. So we are closer now to your field. And so it was an effort which we did together in order to be able to complete. And since I am a soccer fan, it was, of course, very nice to work on this project. And what came out was very satisfying. At the moment, we have some problems with our team, but I think this will come up very good in the future, hopefully. So.
Oh, it's an ongoing project. It's ongoing, actually.
I'm talking about the soccer team of Germany.
Oh, yeah. Okay, no. Okay. Let's keep fingers. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep fingers crossed for this project.
Yes, exactly. Well, this project, fortunately, was finished or completed in time. It was completed 2 years ago already, and so this was a very quick and very kind of efficient process of planning and building, and it was really an honor to work on this project, I tell you.
Yeah, yes, I can imagine. So I really hope that you will have built the campus of the Euro Champion 2024. Let's see whether this turns out correct. Spain is in the middle of that process, so let's see how that goes. Anyways, thank you so much, Anett, for joining us today. It was wonderful talking to someone with such an extraordinary portfolio and learning a bit about your work and your life. It has been a pleasure. And have a fantastic week.
Yeah, and the very best for you, Mo, and hopefully we see us in person.
Yes, exactly. Oh, right. So let's actually not hang up after this, but I am super interested in seeing the skyline of Frankfurt right now through the webcam.
Yes, I think I will walk upstairs now, showing you the skyline.
Great.
So
it looks awesome already.
So now I have to go on the terrace. This is the terrace. And
beautiful.
The skyline
is over there. Fantastic. Yes. Okay, I see. So you enjoy a fantastic view every morning.
The Central Bank is right there. You see this asparagus there?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's exactly so.
Okay, so there's a lot of reasons to work from home, enjoying this view. Okay, so do you actually look at one of your own buildings too?
Yeah, I can look on the Taunusturm, the Marienturm, the Predium. Yeah, 3 high rises. And also the 140 West. So that's
okay. That's
the high ones, not the flatter ones. But
All
so
right, yeah. I mean,
four.
that
I see
makes a lot
4
of
of
sense.
our buildings. Yeah, that's.
I mean, like, that's pretty good.
I wasn't aware of that.
That sounds like a good ratio to me. That sounds like a good ratio to me. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Anett, for this
Thank you so
extraordinary
much.
episode.